Bret, it's great to have you here,
Thanks,
man.
Mosheh.
Congrats on the new book, all about Teddy Roosevelt. This is your 6th book?
Sixth presidential book. Yeah, I wrote about my son's heart stuff, but this is the 6th presidential biography, and it's a lot of fun. I'm addicted to the process.
I was going to say, you have about, well, with 2 presidents having served 2 non-consecutive terms, you have, 39 to go?
Yeah,
39 or 40 to go at this juncture?
I don't know if I'm making it all the way.
Okay.
But it is fun.
You're making incredible progress. I should just say here, background for all of you listening, I had the good fortune of working with Bret. It was my first job out of college, actually while I was still in college, initially working for Chris Wallace and then working as a producer there. So at that time—
We were sad to lose you at the time.
I was sad to leave. I decided to make a bet at the time on Bloomberg TV. And at the time, the bureau chief was Brian Boughton. And he was like, I can't find Bloomberg TV on my dial. Like, what are you doing with this?
Where are you going?
Like, where are you going? Are you sure about this move? Yeah. And it's been an incredible journey since.
Congrats on your success. This is great.
Thank you. And thanks for being here.
You bet.
The role you had during a lot of the time I was at Fox was Pentagon correspondent.
Yeah, 6.5 years.
And I want to get to the Teddy Roosevelt book, but just because there's so much about the Pentagon in the news, and I will say this, Bret, we posted the clip of you and 4-star General Jack Keane talking about some of the new rules that have been imposed there by Pete Hegseth. And we got hundreds and hundreds of notes and questions about that. And so just want to start there in Washington right now, in particular, given your experience covering the Pentagon. Love you to tell the audience about what that entails. I think some people were surprised to learn that even reporters are allowed inside the Pentagon. But what does that role entail, and what should we know about, at least how do you view the various rules that have been imposed here and this sort of back and forth that's been happening with the secretary?
Yeah, I think there was a misunderstanding about how they talked about it, that reporters were suddenly going into classified areas and places that they weren't supposed to go. There were rules and regulations when I covered the Pentagon for 6 years. Everybody had a badge. You could walk around some places in the Pentagon, but you couldn't go to top classified areas. The tank where all the commanders are, the generals' meeting rooms. I mean, you couldn't go in the places that they just burst in. Also, you were covering stories and talking to people, but you were not, in search of trying to get classified information. That has happened, and there have been investigations about that. But you're talking about finding out from different services how they see different things and piecing stories together. That's called journalism. When the regulations came out, what it sounded like, and General Keane talked to this, was that they wanted to protect the information that was going out. And if they weren't releasing it and you were covering it, you were in violation as the rules suggested, and you could be at risk of losing your pass. That's not, how it goes. I also covered the White House. Nobody's walking into the Oval Office. Nobody's walking into the situation.
Right, when you're a White House correspondent, you're actually very limited real estate of where you can walk around. Yeah.
And it does help to be on the campus because an official could come to you and say, this is happening, or we've got this, or there's an interaction. This is dangerous for you to report. People's lives are at risk. And there's a negotiation. There's a talk about a story, whether it goes or not. We had multiple times where that happened. I think there's
I think important for people to know that, like, upon, especially, at the networks I've worked at, the network you've been at, you discover certain information. Your first call is to those officials being like, will this reporting put lives at risk?
Yeah. And we always made sure that was the case as far as not doing that. So I think, I was happy that Fox signed on right away. There wasn't even a discussion. We obviously covered it, had my conversation with General Keane, but we stood with all the networks and the papers about pushing back on that policy.
How do you think this ends? Do you think that there's going to be some sort of compromise there, or?
It doesn't sound like it right now. It sounds like the Pentagon is welcoming in all kinds of other outlets that have signed that document. And I don't know that that's good, in the big picture. It's not that we're going to stop covering the Pentagon or the military. We're obviously going to cover it, but it won't be from the inside, and maybe a little different.
And when it comes to final question here on this front, like how the viewers, how the average American, what does that mean for what they'll learn about the military, what they might not learn about what's going on?
I hope it doesn't mean much. I hope we're going to cover the stories and get the same access to sources around the world. You know, we have, as a Pentagon correspondent, you're talking to a lot of different people, a lot of different places. It's just a lot easier to make that connection, and I think it's important for military families, for average Americans to know what's going on with the U.S. military as much as we can.
Getting to the book here.
Yeah.
So 6 presidential biographies, Washington.
So it started with Eisenhower, then Reagan, FDR, and that was the 3 days series, and then To Rescue the Republic with Grant, The Constitution with Washington, and To Rescue the American Spirit with Teddy Roosevelt.
So how did we get to Teddy Roosevelt next?
Teddy Roosevelt is this amazing character who jumps off the page. There's so many like anecdotes that are so rich about him. But each one of these books looks at a soda straw moment, which maybe history overlooked or the importance of it was overlooked. And I think the importance of his legacy is that he was trying to get America to be a global leader, to be front in the world as the century is turning to be leading. And he does that by solving the Russia-Japanese territorial battle, which is turning into a war. He messages both countries, he telegrams, he invites them to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and hosts this peace negotiation where he's logistically talking to both teams and eventually gets a peace deal between the two countries that gets him the Nobel Peace Prize. It also gets America on the world stage.
It's so interesting as you lay this out that, you know, you're talking about 120 years ago, but there are parallels to today. I mean, even just what you're describing in terms of foreign intervention, Nobel Peace Prize. Talk to me, you know, as you know, you've been covering Trump since day one, before day one. Mm-hmm. The parallels as you researched and wrote this book between the Teddy Roosevelt era and the era we're currently in.
Yeah, so I talk about it in the book in the beginning and the end. There are similarities, you know, in personality and force of personality in his, in both presidents' acknowledgement of the power of the press. They both get in fights with the press, but they reach out to the press.
Well, it's so interesting, right? Like Teddy Roosevelt coined muckraker for journalists. Trump going with fake news, or among other things, he's referred to us. But the sort of, they need the press, but also are critical of the press.
Yeah. And Teddy Roosevelt realizes the power of the press. And he realizes it from his time when he leaves Assistant Secretary of the Navy under McKinley. He resigns to form this Rough Riders group to go into the Spanish-American War. He has a boat down that he's going to go to Cuba, and he sees that these journalists, New York Times and others, don't have a way to get there, and he says, come with us. So they essentially embed with the Rough Riders, which is this group of the cowboys and ranchers and also Harvard guys. That was a Star Wars bar of fighters. But he brings the press with him, and that is why all those charges up San Juan Hill and all of that is documented very specifically by the press that he brings with him.
So he understood, you know, what was possible then in the same way, you know, as we, you know, we've been asked a lot, like, you know, what is it that elects certain presidents? And it is that understanding of the medium, right? Whether it's FDR and radio and Kennedy and television and Trump and Twitter, right?
Twitter, TV, you know, he's picking up the phone and talking to a lot more reporters than you know about. There's a lot of people that are having conversations off the record with this president.
Even people who on camera he will criticize
100%.
And mock.
100%.
What do you make of that?
He knows the power of informing where his head is. And those reporters, I hope, understand the power of those off-the-record conversations. I know I do. I mean, I value that insight to know what's next, what he's thinking, to be able to think, here's what's coming down the pike.
I'm curious, as you studied Teddy Roosevelt, like, did you ever imagine, like, what would Teddy Roosevelt be doing in 2025? How would he be utilizing the press? What would he think of this era that we're currently in, given what you learned about his personality, his views on executive power?
Yeah.
You know, even as we talk, you know, Bret, as we're talking today, you know, one of the big stories is the renovations, right?
Yeah.
The breaking down of the East Wing and the building of like, Teddy Roosevelt built the West Wing.
100% built the West Wing. Took down what was there and built up the office building that we see today.
Yeah.
And there was ugly construction going on. I'm not saying that image doesn't viscerally affect people as they think about history when they see the bars and the steel. I mean, it gets to people. But if you think about history, there have been 14 presidents that have done major renovations. Herbert Hoover dug up the inside down to the rafters and, changed the interior of the White House. But to your first question, first of all, Teddy Roosevelt would have a massive Instagram account. And X, he would be on X, putting out messages, I'm sure. He was also a guy that, I think his essence comes down to the speech that he delivers after he leaves office, Citizenship in the Republic, that comes to be known, the man in the arena speech, which is, you got to get in the game. You got to be a doer. You can't be a critic from the outside just throwing grenades in. And, I think he would be very active in trying to inspire Americans.
One of his big pushes, though, he's a big populist. And he very much wanted to fight the big corporations. J.P.
Morgan and others.
Yeah. I mean, and interestingly, that was the era, too, where there was no Federal Reserve. Mm-hmm. And there were several time periods where, literally without a Federal Reserve Bank, J.P. Morgan got the phone call being like, can you bail out the country?
Yeah.
But at the same time, Teddy went after these guys. And we do live in an era now where, literally the richest man in the world for a while was best friends with the president, Elon Musk. And curious, how Teddy Roosevelt thought about the power of corporations, the power of the richest class, and sort of where we stand today.
He was pro-business, he was pro-capitalism, but he believed capitalism should be for everyone. And he protected the little guy. He had this thing instinctively that he wanted to protect the poor and the people who were downtrodden. He's the first president to intervene in a labor dispute. The coal miners in 1902 go on strike. He intervenes and helps solve that. He files 40 antitrust lawsuits as president. He is very active in expanding executive power. He signs 1,300 executive orders. Just to put that in perspective, George Washington to the McKinley, the 25th president, signed 1,200. So 1,300 for Teddy Roosevelt. Now, a lot of that is conservation and getting land that's protected. It's the national parks, forestry, all of that. But there's also a lot of it is about protecting workers. Creates the FDA, food, drug, make sure that people are protected.
We were just coming out of an era there where Congress was particularly powerful, right?
Yeah. And he takes back a lot of the power. He essentially looks at the Constitution and says, not what does it prevent me to do, but if it doesn't say anything about this, I think I can do it. And he challenges that, which is, you can see that echoing in this president as well.
Oh, absolutely. You see it with him. You see it with some of his top advisors like Stephen Miller and others. You've done the research now related to Teddy Roosevelt and his views of executive power. There is genuine concerns. You're seeing certainly pushback from certain judges too, including some Trump-appointed judges.
Yeah, and listen, it's going to come down to the Supreme Court. This is obviously a Supreme Court that leans towards executive action, it seems, at least in the ruling so far. But a big one's coming up in November where they have to decide on the tariffs and whether he can do what he's doing. If I had to bet, I would say that they're in a good position to win just by the court, but you never know. And the Supreme Court has slapped him back a few times.
One of the questions I get, and I'm curious how you think about this, especially in light of what we've seen. Well, first of all, the criticism of the media, right? Fake news, enemy of the state, et cetera. The pushback we've seen from the FCC, whether it was the Kimmel fallout and other cases. How do you feel right now as a journalist? Mm-hmm. The First Amendment is core to it. We're the only profession written into the Constitution. How do you feel right now about First Amendment rights, freedom of the press, your ability to cover whatever you want to cover, especially in light of what, we also talked about the Hegseth restrictions?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to stand up, to push back. I think it's important not to get emotional about it and just be factual. Fight the fight, make your point. And I think collectively we can do that, cover the place, and not make it the thing that brings the house down. And I think that there's a way to push back. If there are courts that are involved, I think, courts will get involved if there are cases that involve First Amendment. It's worth.
Right, we're watching the AP is suing right now related to the press pool and their access. There's a number of cases going on right now. Yeah.
So I think those will play out. And we'll continue to cover them. I think it's important to make your stand. And if something's happening, I spoke out about AP early on, And I continue to think that that's important.
But where one of the questions we get all the time is like, Moshe, are you worried about the state of our democracy? Like, obviously there's a lot of incendiary extreme rhetoric out there, right?
On both sides.
Totally, right? And, you saw it like play out during the campaign too. Yeah. Words are thrown around these days like fascism and Nazi and Hitler, like all this stuff that's thrown out there. But people feel nervous, right? There's a nervousness about the state of things right now.
I understand it.
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's oversold. And I think even some of the people that are the subjects of it like to stir the pot and like to get people all agitated. And I know President Trump is of the mindset that when he makes the left's heads explode, he has a PR win, not only with his base, but eventually something happens and he says, see, I told you they're crazy. And he plays that almost all the time in this wheel of where he says something that's really, raises a lot of eyebrows. There's a ton of reaction to it, almost overreaction. And then the wheel comes back and people say, yeah, what's the deal with that? And he kind of plays it off a lot of times.
How many interviews have you had with Trump? Do you keep count?
I don't know, 4 or 5.
Right. You spent time with him on Air Force One recently on the way to the summit in Alaska.
Yeah, I did the Super Bowl interview and then one before that. So maybe 5, 6.
What do you think the biggest misconception still that exists out there within the media, but then also just the public writ large? What don't they know about him? Or what do you think still folks get wrong about him a decade into him being on this national stage?
The people who say that he's totally slipping and out of he's going downhill, I don't see that at all. I mean, I see the same speech pattern where he's kind of doing the weave and goes in and out of different things, but he has a tremendous amount of energy. For example, that Air Force One trip to Alaska, it was unbelievable. First of all, he does interview before we get there, then does the Putin stuff, gets back on the plane, and is engaged on telephone calls all the way through. I had to go sit and sleep. I mean, he's got this energy that's nonstop. So I don't see him slowing down. I think that's a misperception. And I think, Moshe, it's like there's a lot of stuff that's an iceberg above the water that everybody focuses on, the controversy of the day, the story of the day. But there's a lot of stuff that's happening below the water that's almost a bigger iceberg that this administration thinks about doing and thought about for 4 years when they were out of office.
Is anything that surprised you, especially in the past 9 months about the second term, expectations you had going in on January 20th, and now you sit here as we tape this, 10 months later, and you're like, wow, I got that totally wrong, or I did not expect that to unfold in that way, given that we had watched 4 years of him?
It surprised me the ferocity of the executive actions at the beginning, the kind of fast and furious list that they had ready to go. It surprised me that the Ukraine-Russia negotiation has been as bumpy and back and forth as it has. And I'm still trying to figure it out to this day. I have the NATO Secretary General on tonight. And, after a Putin call, it seems to change, almost 180. And I think there's more to that and something that I want to dig into.
Yeah, I'm curious as to what his sentiment was like, or the feeling that you got on that trip to Alaska. I mean, did he feel like this, like that they were about to close a deal there or getting close to a deal?
Yeah. He said, this is going to happen. We're going to get a ceasefire, and he's ready to go. Coming back, he said, no ceasefire. It's a bigger thing, but we're going to meet. Still optimistic, but there was a difference, in the post conversation. Mm-hmm. And if you saw the actions, and I look at actions from leaders and not just words, the actions of Putin after that are to step up attacks exponentially. And then he meets with President Xi in China, and there are more attacks. This is after the First Lady writes a letter, please stop killing the kids and the women. So I think I can't really explain why the increase in pressure has not been put on Russia to that extent. Yeah,
and this is a warning that Trump got from his predecessors, right? Like going back to Bush, and then now a number of presidents and leaders have said like you can't trust the guy. Putin is one of the more difficult subjects. At the same time, the current president was very much like I thought this was going to be the easy one.
Yeah. And he feels like his force of personality can get things across the finish line. And in many cases, they can. I mean, the Israel-Hamas negotiation doesn't happen without Trump and his team. All of these others, India, Pakistan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Congo, Rwanda, big things happen from force of personality and pressure. This one, he thinks he knows Putin and thinks he hears the right things from Putin, but there's no indication that Putin has changed.
As you've now written a number of these biographies, getting back to Teddy Roosevelt here, he was known for, speak softly and carry a big stick?
Sure,
foreign policy.
Foreign policy.
Lessons from Teddy Roosevelt and his approach to foreign policy that have, been followed by presidents since then and Trump. Are there lessons from Teddy Roosevelt for this era?
Yeah, they got the big stick part. I think they got that part, and the strike in Iran is an example of that. It changed the dynamic in a number of different ways. The speak softly part is not really in the. That's
not really Trump's forte, right?
The same thing,
yeah.
But overall, the outreach and the forward leaning. I mean, if you thought that this was an isolationist administration, it's not. It is outreach. The fingers are out there, and we'll see how the tariff policy works, if it works. And the big question is China. So this next meeting with President Xi, who's another figure that you can't really read.
That's also been a roller coaster.
Totally.
Right? You have the whatever we got up to 200% tariffs, and then we're
at
making a deal.
157 now.
And now we're back to right after going back down. Now we're back at 157. I mean, I actually was talking to my financial advisor today, who he gives me financial advice. I give him news advice.
Yeah.
And he's like, "What's happening in China?" I was like, "I cannot tell you.
Yeah.
I know Trump's taking this Asia trip." And it could go one of two directions,
He speaks optimistically about it. I've heard from the Chinese. I've met with the ambassador. They think there's a deal that can be made, but it's like a dance where we have not picked a partner yet.
The other storyline, and it's actually sort of amazing that we're 3 weeks in here to the government shutdown, and it feels like it's a back burner story at times. That
I know.
The majority of Americans don't feel it.
That's
Obviously,
true.
If you're a government worker, you feel it.
Especially this week as the checks stop.
Exactly. What's your sense? You've now been in Washington covering. Actually, I think the majority of shutdowns in history have taken place just in the past couple of years. As it's it's sort of untouchable, third rail, and now like a shutdown is sort of par for the course as part of strategy. What's your sense of how long this thing might last, and which side might have to blink here?
On the which side it might have to blink here, I don't know yet. I sense there's resilience, and both sides are kind of digging in. They both think that they have the argument. Republicans say we are just past the clean funding, the Biden level funding till the end of the year. We will negotiate on Obamacare subsidies, but we are not being held hostage by this. The Democrats say you guys will never do that, and we need to fight this fight, fight on this hill. I don't think people fully understand why we're in this mess because, Obamacare originally was set up that the marketplaces were designed to drive prices down.
Right.
And they didn't. And so that's why the subsidies had to be put in to keep prices low. They expire at the end of the year. Nobody likes to have prices go up. Republicans, Democrats, Independents.
Right, and I've seen stats that actually I think slightly above 50% of the people who receive those subsidies live in red states.
Yes, and so you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican, talking about the importance of getting this deal done. I think the president realizes that there has to be a deal here. I don't think he wants to be the one to kowtow or to give up on this moment. You're right, we haven't seen the pain. I think we will in coming days.
So you think it's a matter of days before the phone calls really start getting to the Capitol Hill offices and they need to wrap this up?
I do.
Yeah.
I think that that's going to happen. It's definitely going to affect a Virginia governor's race if it's still going on.
Yeah, no, because I think the record one was that 2018, 2019, 35 days.
Yep.
And we're approaching that.
We're getting there.
Yeah. When it comes to immigration, that's another big story we were watching actually here in New York. There was a raid yesterday. And especially as we cover the mayoral election here, it looks like a likely win for Mamdani unless something significant changes. And the dynamic that's going to play out in New York City in particular. But back to the ICE and immigration raids, there's always been, for years, the Republican Party, sort of like connected to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, very business centric. And you're seeing a really interesting dynamic play out right now within the party, within the White House, even between sort of like the business first and then sort of the Stephen Miller wing of the party. Curious, as you've been watching this play out very closely, what should the Americans look ahead to right now when it comes to deportations, ICE, immigration? We did see this huge funding increase in the big, beautiful bill for ICE. I think they're going to be the largest law enforcement agency, if not already, larger than the FBI. What we've seen now play out in the first 9 months, like how did the next 3 years go?
I don't know. I think that there is an opportunity for President Trump here in that he could change the dynamic completely and say that I have shored up the border. It is secure. There's only, 0 people have come across in X number of months into the country. And now it's time to figure out a deal. Imagine if this president did that, almost take an issue away from Democrats and come up with people living here before 2020 who are paying taxes. And
this has been the dream for years. I mean, this is something we covered during the Bush administration.
And so we thought he could do it. He couldn't do it because of the division in his own party. But if there's somebody who could do it, it might be President Trump. And he could see the potential political benefit to it, change the dynamic and the perception of ICE going after criminals, the people who pay taxes, who are here and have had families,
Do you think that's a possibility given, especially the last couple of months here?
I'm just throwing
You're laying out options.
I'm saying that imagine as a political thought process, what that would mean politically. It would be massive. Do I believe that that's on the cusp? No. Do I believe that Stephen Miller is definitely running point on, immigration policy? Yes. And I think that while there's a lot of sympathy for going after criminals and getting bad elements out of the country, I think the perception, the images, how that plays out, it's Gavin Newsom and Pritzker and others are going to really tap into the furor about it and use it as a political issue.
Yeah, it feels like it could be a potential political vulnerability down the road, especially, I mean, in talking to people even, who've been sort of just sitting back, some of the people who marched over the weekend in the No Kings marches said that was the issue that got them off the bench, that got them off the couch.
Yeah. And it was different issues when we talked to people in those marches. It was variety, But, I think that there is this sense that if there's one thing Donald Trump can do is sense a vibe, sense a way that he can own a moment. And he's done it before. I'm just saying it's a possibility.
And it's sort of interesting, take stuff from the brink, right? You can't, what you laid out, that scenario seems like, given the images that have been playing out, the lawsuits, Portland, Chicago, seem impossible or really far away. But you can sort of take it back to the Middle East here in terms of what we saw in the aftermath of the Israeli failed strike in Qatar and how quickly things turn there.
Right. Think about the protests in the colleges, ceasefire now, all of that, and the furor and excitement and passion about that as we were supporting Israel. And then the dynamic changes, they get a ceasefire, and it totally changes the situation. Now, I think there's questions about whether that's going to last and how that looks and what happens. But those are big, big shifts that this president, like Teddy Roosevelt, could do.
Yeah, I mean, Teddy wanted the Nobel Peace Prize. That's clearly this ambition for Trump to get the Nobel Peace Prize. Where did that come from? This idea of him being the war solver. Is that something you think he just sort of accidentally got into, or did he have because it didn't seem like on the campaign trail that this was something he was running on.
No, I think he found that in the White House, and also had remarked about President Obama getting what he thought was an unwarranted Nobel Peace Prize at the beginning of his term.
Right, which even the Obama folks were like, can you not give
we
him
don't need that.
We don't need the Peace Prize. And even the chairman of the Peace Prize committee later said, it was a mistake to give Obama an aspirational, we know he's going to do good things. This is your Peace Prize for your future achievements.
Right. Talk to the people in the Arab Spring about all that.
If Teddy Roosevelt had one piece of advice for Donald Trump, get in the mind of Teddy Roosevelt having written the book, or maybe multiple pieces of advice, what do you think a conversation would be like between Teddy Roosevelt and President Trump?
It'd be interesting to be a fly on the wall, 100%.
Two New Yorkers taking crazy routes to the presidency.
Big personalities, funny, both of them pretty funny. You know, both of them stirring the pot and anti-establishment, really pushing back against the big party leaders.
Both survived assassination attempts.
Donald Trump in his ear and Teddy Roosevelt, a bullet in the eyeglass case that almost gets into his chest.
And then he proceeds to give a whole speech afterwards.
45 minutes with a blood-soaked shirt in Milwaukee. But his success there, another lesson for Republicans about a third party, his success was the biggest third-party turnout for the Bull Moose Progressive Party, and it essentially gives the White House to Woodrow Wilson.
Right. Hold on. Just for background for those who aren't familiar, he was a two-term Republican president.
Yep.
He leaves. Taft becomes president. He's unhappy with Taft. He wants to run again. His party says no, thank you. So he makes his third party run.
Right.
Yeah.
And he gets more than 19% of the vote, and that gives the White House to Woodrow Wilson, which he has a major problem with as far as how Woodrow Wilson deals with World War I. So, you know, I think they would have mutual respect for each other. They had different ideologies in some ways, but they are both doers. You know, they are both men in the arena, and Teddy would advise more of the speak softly, and I'm not sure President Trump would take that advice.
Teddy, that worked in the last century.
It's a different time, Teddy. Okay.
Have you done your Trump for Trump?
I have not done the Trump for Trump, but I've done it for others who say he would enjoy it. I don't know.
Bret, it's been great chatting.
Thanks, Mosheh.